You're optimistic in the long term.
Yeah.
And you're pessimistic. You're acutely pessimistic.
Yeah.
Joe, like just short, glancing blows of pessimism every so often.
Yes.
But overall, there's a cloud of optimism.
Eoin, you uploaded a video called Responding to Zach Tallander's Retirement, and it's a bit different from the content you normally produce, but I thought it was really great bit of content. And I noticed there was, a Stoic influence in there. Like, I'm a fan of Stoicism myself. I've got a lot of value out of it. And I was just wondering how you got into it and how it's maybe influenced the way you approach the work you do or life in general.
So I think I would have had somewhat of a Stoic mindset naturally, just the way my brain chemistry worked, I think. But I had a lot of misunderstandings of what Stoicism was. So I've heard one person describe it as like lowercase Stoicism, but as lowercase s, and then there's like uppercase Stoicism, which is actually Stoic philosophy. So I would have been Stoic in terms of, emotional responses were something I had pretty good at issue with controlling. So I was good at, not overly responding to events, a lot unchecked anger or extreme emotion, something I would have been not very good as a child. I was incredibly dramatic as a 6-year-old's own. But as I got older, I got a lot better with it. Through sport, martial arts, stuff like that helped me an awful lot. To develop, the way I developed, as a person who I wasn't overly given to extreme outbursts. I wasn't... I was quite good at controlling things and rationalizing them somewhat, but over the years I kind of slowly, maybe like influenced, like 5 years ago, I would have probably first been aware of Stoicism. I'd read a lot of books. I listened to a lot of Audible as well in the last year. I probably read a book every 2 weeks or so. Like, I just like gathering information on random things. Like at the moment I'm just listening to a book on the rise and fall of the Third Reich. The last book I was listening to was on the Comanche Empire. I like reading for entertainment, but I also like reading some philosophy books. Lots of them are nonsense, I'll be honest. From my point of view, I just had no time for them. But Stoicism was something I originally thought was something similar to kind of Buddhism, where you don't react to things. Emotional possessions are useless, which I had no time for either, because life is for living and I want to enjoy life, and I thoroughly enjoy life. I enjoy doing lots of things. So that to me seemed, and I could be wrong about Buddhism too, by the way, if anyone's listening, before they get up in arms, but that to me didn't seem like it made sense, and I considered Stoicism similar to that, and I was very, very, very uneducated on it. Whereas, some issues recently, they're very minor in comparison to other people's, but they stressed me an awful lot, and prior to that I'd already been reading a lot about Stoicism, and it's something that I got more into in the last few months, and it's, I wouldn't say helped me deal with issues, but it's definitely added to my already constant attitude towards things anyway. It's just let me think about things better, the way I act towards things. It hasn't changed anything, I think, fundamentally, but it's definitely assisted certain scenarios where I think it's kind of condensed what I already would have approached a certain scenario. My natural moods would have been similar to Stoicism anyway, but it's let me rationalize them a lot better, I think, and let me think about things in a better way. And in certain scenarios, it's just helped me outright deal with those scenarios. And I think same way you train your body and stuff like that, as cliched it is, educating your mind is very, very important as well. I think a lot of people go through life and just wander from one misgiving to the next and never really understand why it's happening and why their reactions are the way they are. So I think it's very important that you also educate yourself as a person. I'm not going to do that avenue of education via people, but I'll certainly happy to talk about it, how I think about it. Life is hard enough as it is. There's no point making it harder for yourself, and a lot of people make things very hard for themselves. So I'm trying to figure out how can I make the best of any situation, really, I suppose. And Stoicism is just something that gelled very well with my attitude towards things. Like Fitz has talked about before, there was a period of time about 2 years ago where mindfulness was the thing to do, like mindfulness apps, listening to meditation apps was the thing when everyone was supposed to do it. And Fitz talks about he tried it, and the last thing he wants to do is just sit alone in a room listening to nothing. Fitz is kind of a person who's a doer. That crackhead energy is there for a reason. Fitz prefers to go weld a new table or something, and that's how he rationalizes thoughts, whereas I would be the opposite. Well, not the opposite, in fact. I didn't find mindfulness very useful, but I would think about things a lot, and Stoicism was something that helped me direct them in a more productive attitude. I think when I was thinking about problems, when I would have been heading that direction naturally, but I think it's let me get to certain places faster, which I would inevitably end up. I suppose people think I would be somewhat pessimistic, but a default optimism would be my way of thinking about things. Fitz knows this because he knows me so long, my girlfriend, but I think people who wouldn't know me so well might actually think I'm quite pessimistic and maybe somewhat dour, but very, very optimistic person. I am someone who is very I don't see any reason not to be optimistic. Otherwise, why would you?
You're optimistic in the long term.
Yeah.
And you're pessimistic. You're acutely pessimistic.
Yeah.
Joe, like just short, glancing blows of pessimism every so often.
Yes.
But overall, there's a cloud of optimism.
Like, I think because things are hard as it is, so like things are bound to get you eventually. And the one thing I really like about Stoicism, seems around the top of it, is they call them Protopassions. I kind of think of them as the fast emotions. So your initial response, that fast emotion that you don't have any control over. So when you think of something, I don't have anxiety, I don't have any, well, I maybe have some mental disorders, but I'm blissfully unaware of them, and everyone around me is. But I don't have any, I didn't deal with it for like depression and stuff like that. I don't have anxiety, I don't have any diagnosed mental issues. So for me, it was just improving the way I live, essentially, was why I liked Stoicism. So those fast emotions are something everyone deals with. The Protopassion sounds a bit weird saying them. In my head, when you say fast emotion, it's that initial emotion when you think about something that is catastrophize something, or most people, as you say with those YouTube comments stuff, you see the one negative one. So most people's thought process is to the worst case scenario initially. Like, you'd want to be a very special person where your initial response, that very first response, is something positive. Most people, it's very negative. And I think those kind of negative emotions, they gather momentum. And if that's your negative reaction, if you're unable to change that, I think it can lead to very bad scenarios, because ultimately, from what I've seen, who dares wins. The risks pay off if you take enough of them with enough work behind them. So being optimistic and taking risks has worked out well so far for me. I'm still here currently, and that might not be the case next year, but I'll continue to live the way I've living. And I'm not talking about, try heroin or try meth, but I mean, take the risks on certain things if you put in enough work to them. That's kind of a very, very short but very long answer to that question, I think.
No, I appreciate it. It's very interesting to hear your thoughts on it. And I think personally, I'm interested in Buddhism and Stoicism. I do quite a bit of meditation, but one of the things I really like about Stoicism is it's much more immediate, in that if you're able to reframe the way that you're looking at a certain situation or put it in a different perspective, it almost immediately provides some relief, or allows you to look at things in a new angle. Whereas with meditation, it's much more of like a slow burn. You need to put in the kind of minutes and the hours, and over time maybe your reactions to those fast emotions you might have some more control over them. But Stoicism, I think, offers a much more immediate tool to use.
It's I feel like Stoicism is just infinitely more practical than any other philosophy I've ever encountered. It's just because I'm a very practical person, I think, ultimately, but I'm also very emotional, I suppose, at the same time, which you wouldn't think from unless you got to know me well, I would think.